Philip Mountbatten, always feeling a bit of an outcast, has gone down in history as one of the pillars of the modern British monarchy. On the 9th of April 2021, it was announced that the Duke of Edinburgh, consort of Queen Elizabeth II, had died. He missed his centenary by just 2 months. Coming from a royal family, Philip arrived in the UK at the age of 8. His childhood was a wandering one. The expulsion from Greece effectively broke up the family. His parents travelled to different countries and the boy was left in the care of relatives, and throughout his teenage years Philip had essentially no proper home. In the late 30s he met the very young Princess Elizabeth, who later became his wife. Their marriage, which lasted 73 years, has been called one of the strongest royal unions in history. Philip has spent most of his life in the UK, but to the last he still felt a little bit like an alien. He went from an emigrant and a refugee to the absolute symbol and citadel of the British royal family. Philip was born on the 10th of June 1921 on the island of Corfu. He was the only boy and the youngest of 5 children of Prince Andrew and Princess Alice Battenberg. The prince's grandfather, King George I, was married to Olga Konstantinovna Romanova, Grand Duchess and daughter of Grand Duke Konstantin Nikolaevich. Thus, through his grandmother Olga, Philip was related to the Romanovs and was a great-grandson of Emperor Nicholas I. In addition, his grandfather George I's sister was Empress Maria Feodorovna, the mother of Nicholas II. Another sister of George I, Alexandra of Denmark, married Edward VII and became the mother of King George V of England. Philip was also related to the British royal family through his mother, Alice Battenberg, great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. Thus, Philip and Elizabeth were also related to each other, but rather distantly. From childhood, Philip held the title of Prince of Greece and Denmark. In 1922, his uncle, King Constantine I of Greece, was forced to abdicate, and Philip's father, Andrew of Greece, was expelled from the country with his family as one of the perpetrators of the failed military campaign. A 1.5-year-old boy was taken out of Greece by ship in an orange box. Philip's family temporarily found refuge in Paris, where they were allowed to stay at an estate owned by Marie Bonaparte, wife of Andrew's brother George. Shortly after the move, Philippe's mother, Alice, began to show signs of severe emotional distress and her mental health deteriorated dramatically. The couple decided to place the children in the care of relatives so that they would not be traumatized by their mother's unstable condition. In 1928, aged just 8, Philippe traveled to the UK where he was looked after by his grandmother Victoria of Hesse-Darmstadt, granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and his uncles and aunts. In 1931, after a nervous breakdown, Alice left for treatment in Switzerland, and Andrew moved from Paris to the south of France. Philip periodically visited his father, but with his mother was not seen for a long time. From 1932 to 1937, he never received any letters from her. Philip's sisters married and went to live in Germany. Thus, of his close relatives, the boy was left with only his grandmother Victoria. Already as a child, Philippe vividly felt the absence of his home as such. Many years later, when asked by a British journalist what language he spoke at home, Philip interjected, "What do you mean by home?" The boy was educated in England until 1933, then spent 2 terms at school in Germany, but then returned to the UK again. During this time Philip became interested in sport and even captained the school hockey and cricket team. Given the proximity of his family to the British monarchy, the boy was among the guests at the most important events, such as the coronation of King George VI, Elizabeth's father. At the age of 16, he experienced another tragedy, the death of his sister Cecilia. The plane carrying her entire family, including her husband and 2 children, crashed. There were no survivors. Philip traveled to Germany to attend Cecilia's funeral. Soon the young man's uncle George Mountbatten dies of cancer. This is another shock for Philip. With Uncle George they were close. In 1939, a momentous meeting occurs for Philip, their first full-fledged acquaintance with Princess Elizabeth. She is 13 years old, he is 18. Most likely, it was at that moment that the young daughter of King George developed a liking for Philip. All in the same 1939, he enters the Royal Naval College. Graduating from the school with the rank of midshipman, Philip went to the Navy, where he served the entire Second World War. In 1942 he became an officer in the British Royal Navy. Throughout his service, Philip is in correspondence with the young princess, and during his rare holidays he spends time with her family. Elizabeth places a framed photograph of Philip on her desk. After the end of the Second World War, the young officer returned to Britain and asked George for his eldest daughter's hand in marriage. In 1947 their engagement was officially announced. By this point Philip had virtually lost contact with his family. His father had passed away in 1944, his mother had returned to Greece, and his sisters were still living in Germany. Neither the groom's mother nor his sisters attended the wedding of Philip and Elizabeth. The ceremony took place on the 20th of November 1947 in Westminster Abbey. Shortly before his marriage, Philip changed his name from Battenberg to the anglicised version of Mountbatten, renounced his claim to the Greek throne and took British citizenship. He was also to convert from Greek Orthodoxy to Anglicanism. Philip now holds the title of Duke of Edinburgh, as well as Earl of Merionethan and Baron of Greenwich. For the first few years after his marriage, Philip continues to develop his military career and receives several high appointments, notably becoming commander of HMS Magpie. In 1948 Elizabeth and Philip had their firstborn son, Prince Charles, and in 1950 the couple's second child, Princess Anne, was born. While Elizabeth's father, King George VI, ruled the country, the young couple were allowed a certain degree of freedom. They travelled, stayed abroad for long periods of time, even lived for a while in Malta. Philip was actively engaged in his own career. The situation changed in the early 50s, when King George's health began to deteriorate. Elizabeth was required to take over far more royal affairs, and Philip had to appear beside his wife in public. The military career was largely over. In 1952, King George died and Elizabeth ascended the throne. The new situation for both spouses provoked a certain crisis in their relationship. Philip did not easily accept the role of +1. He wanted their joint children to bear his surname, effectively changing the name of the whole family from Windsor to Mountbatten. Parliament, and the Queen herself, were not keen on the idea, and Philip had to put up with it. Rumours that all was not so perfect in the royal marriage began in 1956 when Philip embarked on an international sea tour alone. In 5 months he visited many countries and continents, from Gibraltar to Australia and Antarctica. The Queen was with her children in the UK the entire time. For Philip, this trip was a kind of breath of freedom. Subsequently, however, gossip spread that during the trip he allowed himself certain liberties. However, confirmations of these speculations were not found. Rumors of Philip's infidelity had circulated many times during his marriage to Elizabeth, but no solid evidence had been produced. If the Queen paid attention to these speculations, at least not publicly. At the same time, in 1956, Prince Philip founded his own program aimed at supporting young and gifted people from all over the world, the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. The main idea of the award is to help young people to discover and fully demonstrate their unique abilities, be it intellectual activity, volunteering, sports or arts. The most successful members of the program get access to prestigious education, as well as privileges to help them find employment or develop their own projects. In 2006, the award was given royal status, as Elizabeth honored the services of the award to society and the state. In addition, Philip has patronized around 800 different charitable organizations. In 1960, Queen Elizabeth and Philip had their third child. Prince Andrew, the couple's last child, Prince Edward, was born in 1964. Around the same time, the Duke of Edinburgh became actively interested in nature protection and ecology. In 1961 he became president of the World Wildlife Fund in Great Britain, traveling around the world and advocating the protection of endangered species. However, in the same year the Prince and the Queen were captured in a group photo during a tiger hunt in India. The Duke of Edinburgh shot the animal himself. Innovation and technological development in various fields were also among Philip's interests. In 1969, it was on his initiative that the BBC was authorised to show the royal life from the inside. The documentary about the monarchy doing routine, everyday things like eating breakfast together, going for a walk or watching TV made a sensation, but not quite in the way Philip expected. The effect of closeness to the people did not work, the film came out a little bit contrived and ridiculous. This documentary was shown only once on national television, but it was after this invasion into the private life of the royal family that British journalists felt that from now on it was allowed to rinse the Windsors in the public space in a sense. Especially acutely all the power and ruthlessness of tabloids British royal family felt after the breakup of Prince Charles with Diana Spencer. And although the main star for the press remained, above all, Diana, Charles had a very difficult time. Diana's death, which had such a negative impact on the Windsors' popularity and ratings, proved to be a serious internal test for the family. At that moment, it was Prince Philip who became an unconditional support and encouragement to his grandsons William and Harry. Rarely showing emotion in public, Philip had a reputation for being rather cold, reserved and closed, but his inner circle spoke of him with unwavering warmth. Except, perhaps, Prince Charles, who periodically in interviews hinted at his father's emotional inaccessibility. At the same time, when Prince William was asked in 2016 to describe his grandfather, he replied, one word, legend. Prince Philip's controversial reputation is often mentioned. The Duke of Edinburgh was usually reproached for racism and incorrect statements. During his many years of service as a representative of the royal family, Philip has made a huge number of speeches, and some statements have even become quotations. Once, at a meeting with children, Philip told a 13-year-old boy who dreamed of flying into space that he could never do it because he was too fat. Prince Philip spent more than 60 years in the royal service, the lion's share of his life. After sacrificing his favorite career, he devoted himself entirely to working for the monarchy. He only officially retired from public duties in 2017, at the age of 96. The fear of remaining in the status of an appendix to the Queen was not justified. Philip took on the role of a kind of titan and citadel for his family. Not always perfect, sometimes incorrect and a little rude in public, the Duke of Edinburgh is likely to be remembered not as an idol, but as a living person, with his peculiarities of character, unique features and imperfections.